Should I take this job?
What school should I attend?
What's the best move for my family?
Should we adopt?
What should I major in?
Should I quit my job?
What school's best for my kid?
Should I go back to church?
Should I move in with him?
Should I be friends with this person?
What should I major in?
Should I move?
Should I start my own business? Should I end this
Should I marry
relationship?
Should I marry him?
All right, well, what's up, what's up? Welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris. I'm the lead pastor here at Hoboken Grace, and I have been out for a couple of weeks, but I am very, very excited to be back. Would you guys just give it up for Chris and the rest of the band? It's just that incredible. It's just awesome. I'm going to talk about that more later on as we walk through this. But as I said, I've been away for a couple of weeks. And it's interesting. I was telling Justin, you know, we've been doing this now the Hoboken Grace has been here now for 9 years. I've been doing this really for about 14 years. And if I'm out for 2 weeks, I get nervous. Like, I look at my hand. It's crazy. You would think after all that time that would go away. It doesn't go away. But it's kind of changed. It used to be like a scared nervous. Now it's like an excited nervous. And I have to come up here and say, Chris, don't talk too fast. Don't talk too fast. Because I just want to run. I'm so excited to be back and so excited about everything that God's doing. Both what we were able to see as we were over in Sierra Leone. And for those of you who don't know, the reason that I was out is because of the fact that a team of ours went over to Sierra Leone. We got to begin to work on a new mission strategy for us here at Hoboken Grace, where as we move into these situations and as we move into these different places around the world, that we're no longer going there to be able to do the work ourselves, but to be able to encourage and build up those who are there doing the work. They can do it better than we can. Usually if we come in and we try to do the work ourselves, we're actually going to do it in a way that hurts what they do, as opposed to coming in and just helping them to get stronger and encouraging them and building into them. And it was amazing. We got to do that. We went over there, and every day or every year, there's one day of the year where they bring all of the kids that they work with together. And for those of you who don't know, the organization that we work with in Sierra Leone is called ETC, or Enable the Children. And they work with special needs kids in Sierra Leone. They're the only organization in all of Sierra Leone that works with these special needs kids. In that culture, when a child is born with a special need, they're usually left for dead. They're believed to be demon possessed. They're believed to be a devil child. And so therefore, they're usually taken to the countryside and left for dead. And so this organization is not just coming in to work with these kids physically, but then also to work with the communities, to help them understand that this isn't the case, that these kids can grow up, that these kids can, in many cases, learn how to be able to eat and how to be able to walk, and depending on whatever it is that their disability is. And so every year they bring all these kids together. We thought it was going to be just a couple hundred people for this beach day where these families can interact with one another, because it's crucial for these parents to see other parents that have kids that are going through the very same things that they are. We thought it was going to be a couple hundred people. It was just shy of 900 people. They work with over 600 kids with disabilities. Over 600 kids. And the work that they're doing is phenomenal, because it's not just changing these kids' lives. And this is what I got to see on the beach that was really special for me, because of the fact that, for those of you who don't know, my second son has Down syndrome. And one of the things that I've noticed is the fact that Kale has Down syndrome. It affects the way that his brothers interact with other special needs kids, because they're more willing to accept them. They're more willing to play with them. It's not strange for them. They understand that all of us are different and develop at different stages, and that's the way they just think the world works. And so it's really special for me on this beach day, because basically what we did, and just to let you know, if you're thinking about going on a mission trip, this is the mission trip to go on. We spent most of our time on the beach. It was beautiful. It was amazing. That's why I'm tan. But we go out there on this beach, and it was an amazing day. I just spent the day playing soccer with kids. The entire day. I was going to die by the end of it. I realized how out of shape I was. But it was really special to watch because these were entire families who were there. And it was really special to watch the kids who were siblings of the special needs kids play with all these kids, and they all played together, and there wasn't any like, oh, you can't really play this game right, so you're out. And watching that happen, I realized what ETC is doing for the culture in that country. Because the way that you change the culture is that people are exposed to individuals with special needs, and they realize, wait a second, this isn't weird, this isn't strange. We can enjoy life together. We just develop differently and in different ways. And to see these siblings growing up, which they haven't had before because these kids were left for dead. And so for the first time, there are individuals not only who are growing up with special needs who are getting help, but there are individuals who are typically developing individuals who are growing up who realize we don't have to be afraid of this anymore, which is incredible. It's changing a culture. We got the opportunity to be a part of that day, and then we got the opportunity to take their entire staff and their families and their kids and take them away for a couple days, and we just got to love on them. And they thought for sure we were taking them away for them to be able to listen to us speak for 9-10 hours a day. They were convinced of that. So they were super nervous when we got there, like, okay, what's the agenda? What do we have to do? We're like, no, just have fun. Just have fun. We're just going to have fun for the next 2 days. It took them a day to actually believe us, but then they settled into it and started to really have fun. It was great. It was awesome. And they were able to go back. I've been able to talk to Anna, who directs ETC, a couple times since then. And she's talked about how the team has just been refreshed and energized and able to go back at what it is that God's created them to do with a renewed energy, which is just awesome. It's awesome. I encourage you, if you're thinking about missions next year, this is the trip to go on. And Anthony, when he comes up here, he'll tell you about South Korea and tell you that that's the trip to go on. But there's so many different, both locally and globally, for you to get involved. I hope you're not just here as an observer. Don't just be here as an observer. I know some of you are here as observers and you think, man, this is great. You're just beginning to taste. You're just beginning to taste of what God has in store for you. And you need to begin to transition from being that observer to actually being part of what God's doing locally and globally as part of our family. If today's your first time with us, you walked in on a great day, because today we're kicking off this new conversation called Direction. And as the video introduced, we're working through this idea or tackling this subject of the future. I don't think that there's anything in our lives that causes more stress than the future. I don't think there's anything in our lives that causes more stress than the future, specifically the fact that we don't know it. Specifically the fact that we don't have a clue what it holds. And we would like to believe that we know the future. We'd love to believe that we can figure out the future. As a matter of fact, there are lots of people who would like to tell you that they can tell you the future, that they can predict the future. And the truth is, as we study history and as we study the variables, we can get better at predicting the future. But the reality is that every single one of us knows. Every single one of us, doesn't matter who you are. As you're here today, it doesn't matter what you believe about God. It doesn't matter. Every single one of us knows this. Every single one. We don't know the future. And as good as we can get at studying history, and as good as we can get at predicting the variables, there are far too many variables, and not just too many variables, there's far too many uncontrolled variables for us to ever actually be able to predict or know the future. One of my favorite games is called the game of Go. It's the oldest board game still played today. It was developed by the Chinese over 2,500 years ago. It's a very simple game. It's just a 19 by 19 grid. It's played with black and white stones. It's as simple as you could possibly get, but yet there are so many variations in the game that up until just last year, they couldn't develop a computer program that could even compete with the best Go players on earth. Because the variables are almost incalculable. That's the future. And it doesn't matter how hard you try. It doesn't matter how much you study. You don't know what's going to happen next. And what's worse is this. You have to make decisions based on that. To make it even better, not only do you not know the future, but every single day, you have to make decisions based on what you think it's going to be. You realize that? You feel it. But have you ever actually taken the time to think through it? Not only do we not know the future, but every day we have to make decisions based on what we think it will be. And for every single one of us, this causes a tremendous amount of stress. Because we're trying to figure it out, and we're trying to figure out what is this going to look like? Well, what's going to happen here? Well, we need to make a decision here. And you hear those questions that came up in the video about the job that you're going to take or the home that you're going to buy and what's going to happen in the housing market and what's going to happen. Every single day, we're making decisions based on what we think the future will be without having any confidence that we can know it. And sometimes we try to trick ourselves into believing that we can know it. And we tell ourselves, no, I got this figured out. 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 Until all of a sudden you get the call from the doctor. And everything changes. Or all of a sudden you walk into work and you find out that someone's been embezzling money and the company's done. And there's no way that you could have known it, and there's no way that you could predict it. So then how in the world are we supposed to make decisions about it? And how in the world are we supposed to have any confidence in it? Every single year about this time, my wife and I have to go through a decision-making process about our son. Our son is currently in a special school that's specifically for individuals with Down syndrome. But if you listen to special needs studies, they tell you, and there's really a ton of mixed advice about whether or not full inclusion is better or partial inclusion is better. And that means that you take a child with special needs, you put them into a class with typically developing students, and there's all this information about there about which one's best and which one's going to help them to be able to reach their potential and which one's going to help them to be able to be part of society as best as they possibly can. And as we come to this point of the year, because they make the decision every single year, the school district makes the decision every single year around his birthday. Every single year, we have to begin to process this and try to make a decision about where we're going to send our son to school and what we think is going to be best for him. And we have to make that decision without having any idea what the future actually holds. And we can guess and we can listen to the experts. This morning you woke up and you made a decision about whether or not you were going to eat eggs. Last year the experts told you that eggs were good for you. This year the eggs are going to kill you. You listen to it and you and trying to tell you exactly what's going to happen, but the reality is, and all of us know it at the core of who we are, we do not know what's actually going to happen. So how in the world do you make decisions based on a future that you can't see? We live with this stress every single day. I'd love to go around the room and take your blood pressure right now. Some of you are thinking to yourselves, my doctor told me to avoid conversations like this. My doctor told me to avoid conversations like this. Some of us live with this pressure more than others. Some of us, this weighs on us heavily every single day and every night. How do you live like that? Here's the reality of it. You weren't created to live like that. Listen to me. Listen. You weren't created to live like that. Now, don't misunderstand me. You weren't created to know the future. You weren't created to know the future. The fact that you don't know the future isn't the result of us walking away from God. Adam and Eve, as they were created, did not know the future. You weren't created to know the future. But you were created to walk with someone who does. Let me take you to one of the most famous passages in all the Scripture. Now, listen to how David captures this in his life. Psalm 23. Psalm 23. Let me take you back to this. And I know many of you have heard this passage many, many times. And sometimes familiarity can allow a passage to lose its power. But let me take you back to it, and hopefully we can kind of regain some of the power that made it so famous. Let me take you back to it. Psalm 23, beginning of verse 1. It says this. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in path of righteousness for his name's sake." And up until this point, this psalm sounds really, really positive and really, really exciting. But David doesn't stop there. He says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." You see this passage where David steps in, and he's trying to help us to understand something about the way in which he engages the future, about the way in which he lives his life. And David says, he's saying to every single one of us, listen, I have an incredible peace about my future. And I have incredible security about my future, not because I know what it is, not because I know what's going to happen, not because I know how all of this is going to play out, but I have incredible peace about my future because I know the one who leads me through it. And he doesn't say I have incredible peace about my future because I'm not going to have enemies, because I'm not going to have to sit at the table with my enemies. He doesn't say I have incredible peace about my future because I'm not going to have to walk through a valley that is shadowed with death. He understands that there's going to be valleys that are shadowed with death. He understands that there's going to be enemies. He says, but in that I have security and I have peace. Why? Why? Because I know the one who's going to lead me through it. I know the one who's going to lead me through it. We live our lives, for many of us, with an incredible stress and pressure about the future. Jesus gave his life to change that in your life. You were not created to live that way. Listen to how Jesus teaches this to his disciples as he's talking to them about what he wants to do in their lives. It's found in John chapter 10. It says this, it says, "I tell you the truth, anyone who sneaks over the wall of a sheepfold rather than going through the gate must surely be a thief and a robber. But the one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. the gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep recognize his voice and come to him. Pay attention to that. The sheep recognize his voice. Now, in this passage, Jesus is specifically talking to the Pharisees and saying, listen, you guys are trying to make your own way in as opposed to following me in. He says, the sheep, the ones who are actually going to know what the kingdom of heaven is like are those who learn the voice of the shepherd. They understand his voice. They recognize his voice. They're listening to his voice. It says the sheep recognize his voice and come to him. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. After he has gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger. They will run from him because they don't know his voice. And throughout this entire passage, he's talking to them about the relationship that he wants to have with them. And he's actually addressing the Pharisees because, and this is a huge mistake that we make when we read through the New Testament. We think that Jesus is opposed to the Pharisees. That is wrong. Jesus loves the Pharisees. Jesus is passionate about the Pharisees. As a matter of fact, in the book of Acts, many of the Pharisees come to be followers of Jesus. But Jesus understands that what the Pharisees need more than anything else is for them to realize that they're trusting in their self-righteousness. Jesus is working in the Pharisees' life for them to come to know him and to trust him. And so he's calling them out of their self-righteousness. He's saying, listen, you guys are trying to find this other way in. He said, you need to listen to me. You need to, and he's trying to call them to follow him, to recognize the truth of what he's saying, to recognize the truth in his voice, to recognize that he's speaking for the Father. And he says, my sheep, they hear my voice, they know my voice. And there's all this conversation about voice. As the passage goes on, Jesus begins to explain this. It says, those who heard Jesus use this illustration didn't understand what he meant, so he explained it to them. He said, I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who come before me were thieves and robbers. He said, anyone else who's told you a different idea of how to be able to get to the Father is a thief and a robber. He says, but the true sheep did not listen to them. Yes, I'm the gate. Those who come in through me will be saved. They will come and go freely and find good pastures, which is interesting because in this moment he references back to Psalm 23. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. Jesus says, this is what I want to do for you. He says, I want to be able to lead you through this. I want, just in the very same way that I led David, I want to be able to lead you through this. It was interesting. Last year, I had the opportunity to go to Assisi. And as I was there, I had the chance to go out into the surrounding countryside. And as I was out in the surrounding countryside, I grew up on a farm, so I'm always interested by farms. And I saw this sheep pasture, and it was a pretty massive farm. And the sheep were in one field in particular, and they were all kind of gathered around. And so I just wanted to be able to spend some time with God. So I went into the pasture, kind of on the other side of it, and sat down. And I saw that there was a shepherd, which was interesting for me because the farms that I grew up on, we didn't have shepherds. But I saw this guy sitting in the middle of the sheep, and there were a couple dogs around him. And I just wanted to watch what was happening. And the shepherd, as I came into this sheep pasture, he began to watch me for a little bit, just kind of seeing, like, what is this guy up to? Why did he jump over the fence? You know, should I be alerted by this or alarmed by this? And he let me sit there for about 15 minutes before he decided that he was going to come over to see what I was doing. And as he stood up and as he began to walk, I saw just this amazing illustration of exactly what Jesus is talking about. Now, it wasn't with his voice. As he stood up and as he walked, he had a rod. And on the top of so that as he walked, that bell would ring. As he began to make his way across that field and that bell was ringing, all of a sudden, all the sheep started to move in unison with him. And if he would stop, the sheep would stop. Not exactly, but they surrounded that bell. And as that bell moved forward, they moved with it. As he got closer to me, because of the fact that he had 2 or 3 dogs with him, I escaped from that situation and very carefully made my way back onto the road. But I continued to watch from a distance, and I watched him walk from that field into another field, and not once did those dogs have to, in any way, shape, or form, herd those sheep into that field. They followed that bell. This is exactly what Jesus is talking about. It's exactly the picture that Jesus is calling us to. He said, when you learn my voice, he said, my sheep learn my voice. And then I want to lead you through that. I don't want you to have to carry that stress that the rest of the world carries. I don't want you to have to live with that the way that the rest of the world does. If you're here and you don't believe me, let me make it really clear for you. Luke chapter 12, Jesus is talking to his disciples. And what does he say to them? He says, then turning to his disciples, Jesus said, this is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food to eat or enough clothes to wear. For life is more than food and your body is more than clothing. Look at the ravens. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, for God feeds them. And you are far more valuable to him than any birds. Can all your worries add a single moment to your life? And if worry can't accomplish a little thing like that, what is the use of worrying over bigger things? Look at the lilies and how they grow. They don't work or make their clothing, yet Solomon, in all of his glory, was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God cares so wonderfully for tomorrow, he will certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith? And don't be concerned about what to eat and what to drink. Don't worry about such things. These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers all over the world, but your Father already knows your needs. Seek the kingdom of God above all else, and he will give you everything you need. And in this passage, Jesus isn't talking about being irresponsible. He's talking about that stress that we carry with us all the time, that we're trying to figure out the future. He says, you're living with that stress. He says, this is a stress that unbelievers live in because they don't have someone to be able to lead them through it. He says, but I want to step into your life and I want to begin to lead you through those things the very same way that I led David through those things. And it doesn't mean that there won't be valleys that are shadowed with death. And it doesn't mean that there won't be situations where you're seated at the table with your enemy. But it does mean, and I love the way that David ends this psalm in Psalm 23. It does mean that surely goodness and love will follow you all the days of your life. Exactly how he ends is to give them a rich and satisfying life. It doesn't mean that there won't be valleys that are shadowed with death. But it does mean that you can walk through this life without that weight that is crushing you now. Without that weight that is crushing you now. And it's not because we know the future. It's not because we know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's because we know the one who does. And when you know the one who does, it changes everything. It changes everything. We live in a culture. We live in a culture that's obsessed with being the leader. Everyone wants to be, I'm going to be the leader. We glorify leaders. But biblically, this is completely inaccurate. Biblically, the idea of leadership is a gift. It's a gift that's given to different people. It's not to be valued above any other gift. It's just a gift, but inside of our culture, we glorify it. We make it into something that it's not. Inside of our culture, everybody wants to be a leader. I'm a leader, man. I'm the one who makes things happen. I'm the one who makes things happen. Listen to me. If you're the one who makes things happen, then you're going to live your entire life having to make things happen. You know what kind of life that is? Believe me, I lived it for a long time. It's miserable. You don't ever get to rest. All the beginning of Psalm 23, it doesn't exist in that life. Jesus says, give up that whole leader thing. Here's the thing. If you want to experience a rich and satisfying life, you become a follower. I know, we don't like that word. Follower. I'm not a follower. I don't follow anything. I don't follow anyone. Jesus says, you want a rich and satisfying life? You got to become a follower. I want you to turn to your neighbor and say, I want to be a follower. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. I know. It caught in your throat. It caught in your throat. The word itself sounds dirty. Something wrong with that. Jesus says, you want a rich and satisfying life? You don't make things happen. I make things happen. You don't make things happen. I make things happen. And you get to come along for the ride. You want to leave that stress behind? You want to take that weight off? It comes when we embrace being a follower. Me, I'm a follower. When we take on ourselves whatever, I'm a follower. My whole life, people have been telling me, Chris, you got to develop a mission statement for your life. Some of you have read business books that have told you this. You got to develop a mission statement for your life. All my mentors used to tell me, Chris, you got to develop a mission statement for your life. You got to develop a mission statement for your life. I struggled with this and struggled with this and struggled with this. Every year I'd come up with a different mission statement. A couple of years ago, I was on a retreat with Axiom. You guys have heard me talk about the impact that they've made in my life. Spending time with God just alone in Connecticut, of all places. Who would think you could experience God in Connecticut? And I found my mission statement. I just want to follow well. You know what I want to do with my life? I just want to follow well. That's it. That's all I want to be. That's all I want to do. Why? Because that's who we are. We're followers. And by the grace and glory of God, we get to follow the one who actually knows the future. And the one that we can trust to lead us into it. Now, typically, we have this conversation, and maybe you've heard this conversation before at churches, and you've been told, you need to become a follower. You need to follow. You need to follow better. Unfortunately, that's usually where we leave off. And we don't actually dive into and dig into, okay, what does that look like? You talk to me about learning Jesus' voice. What in the world does that look like? How do I learn Jesus' voice? And make no mistake about it. When you hear Anthony come up here and he talks about, listen, we want to help people find their way back to God. That does not mean that we want to help people take the first step in accepting Jesus as their Savior. That means that we want to, and everything that we do here at Hoboken Grace, from Sunday morning, from what we do out in the community, is sharing the message of Jesus Christ in these various situations, is to help people go from wherever they may be on this journey. Wherever they may be on this journey, to the point where they understand the voice of the one who leads them forward. What we want to develop in your life is the ability to be able to hear from the Spirit of God that lives in you from the moment that you step into a relationship with Him. Our growth path, everything that we're doing here at Hoboken Grace is designed to do that. And the amazing thing is, and this is what I've been celebrating this past week, both the other night as I'm sitting here and our concert is taking place, and I'm looking at the stage, and it was amazing to me to look at the stage because I know all of the stories of the people on stage. That's one of the unique things that I get to see and be a part of. I know the things that they've struggled with. I know where they've come from. And to be able to see people who have come from, for some of them, wanting nothing to do with God, wanting nothing to do with praising Him, to the point where they're beginning to write songs about Him, and the life change that is taking place in their life. One of the things that we should be celebrating constantly here at Hoboken Grace, and it used to be, and as we first began as a church, we were really good at helping people take the first step. That's not true anymore. We are really good, and God is giving us the ability to be able to develop more and more and more at helping people become true disciples of Jesus. And learning how to be able to interact with God through His Word, and learning how to be able to hear from the Spirit of God and move forward in their life with confidence in their future because they know the one that they follow. And for so many, that's your story. God has continued to develop in you your ability to be able to hear from, listen to, and follow and obey Him. Over the next couple of weeks, what we want to walk through is not just the idea that we should follow, but we want to walk through how you begin to learn His voice. How do you actually begin to learn His voice? To begin to interact with the Spirit of God that lives within you from the moment that you step into this relationship with Jesus. And for those of you who are here and you don't yet know Jesus, you haven't given your life to Him, you haven't trusted Him, we want to walk you through what that means because this is what Jesus wants to do for you too. Don't miss out on that. Jesus gave His life for you to be forgiven and for you to begin to find a relationship with Him in which He would begin to lead you through your future. May we follow well. May we learn the voice, the incredible, beautiful, powerful voice of the one who leads us forward. And may we move into the future with excitement and anticipation and confidence, not in who we are, but in the one that we follow. Will you pray with me? Father, for many of us, it's difficult to embrace this role as a follower. It's difficult for us to walk away from the lie of confidence in ourselves, the lie of believing that we can figure it out, even though we know at our core that we can't, even though we know that there's no way we can know the future. Father, I pray over the next couple of weeks, I pray that you would develop in us, first and foremost, the posture of a follower. That we would learn not to run from waiting on you, but we would learn to enjoy waiting on you. That we truly would learn your voice, to be able to differentiate it from all of those voices in our lives, all those voices in our head, all those voices that pull us in so many different directions. Father, I pray that we would begin to learn, that you would develop in us the ability to follow and follow well. Father, I thank you for what you've made possible. I thank you for what you've done. In Jesus' name, Amen.
Would you stand and let's sing together? Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, mount of thy redeeming love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. 'Cause Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God, he to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. How your kindness yet pursues me, how your mercy never fails me, till the day when death shall loose me. I will sing, oh, I will sing. Oh, to grace, oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness, like a fetter, bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above. How your kindness yet pursues me, how your mercy never fails me, until the day that death shall lose me. I will sing, oh, I will sing, how your kindness yet pursues me, how your mercy never fails me, till the day that death shall lose me. I will sing, oh, I will sing. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above. Here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it. Seal it for thy courts above.
This morning, you guys can have a seat. We get the opportunity to be able to celebrate with one who has stepped into this relationship with Jesus. And if you haven't been here for a baptism at Hoboken Grace before, I just want to let you know a couple things. Number one, as this individual comes on stage, they're going to be surrounded by those who've been meaningful part of this journey for them. And then number two, as they take this step, this is a physical symbol of something that's happened in their life spiritually. This baptism doesn't in any way mean that you now have a relationship with Jesus. It's a symbol of the fact that they have made the decision to step into that relationship. And it's a physical symbol of the fact that who they once were has died, and now they're a new creation, that they've been made new in Jesus. And then number three, the other thing that you need to know is that we believe that this is what it's all about, that the lost has been found. And so therefore, we're going to celebrate this with all that we have. And as this individual comes up out of the water, we're going to celebrate that. We celebrate it because we want him to know how much we love him, and we want him to be glorified for what has happened in this person's life. And then number two, we want for them to know that they're not alone in this journey in any way, shape, or form. So would you guys welcome Gwen to the stage? You're lucky they have the hot water heater working again. Gwen, just really loud, would you kind of introduce those who are with you today?
My husband and everyone from my dinner group.
Gwen, as you take this step, I have two questions for you. Number one, is your faith in Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone?
Yes.
Number two, will you follow wherever he leads? Then Gwen, based upon your profession of faith and what Jesus did for you on that cross, I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. As we go out today, I just want to remind you, if you're here for the first time, take that connection card, stop by a connection point. We've got a free gift that we would love to give you. Also, make sure that we worship Him, that we communicate to Him, that everything that we have is from Him through our giving today, and that we do that before we go. And then may we go out celebrating the one who has given His life to be able to free us in so many different ways, the one who has given His life to bring us back to life. Have a great week, guys. We'll see you next Sunday.